Hey everyone, John Rickarn here again, your host as always of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus podcast, coming to you again from good old Marshall, Minnesota. Now, why do I mention that this time? I think you already know this, but today's guest I want to bring on a good friend of mine. I've actually known her for, not to age myself, but almost 2 decades since my days at Southwest Minnesota State University here in Marshall, Minnesota. Go Mustangs. And this is kind of a more of a tax hack strategy, so to speak, but also a way to utilize some additional tax savings for now in the future, getting many of the benefits from self-directed retirement accounts, IRAs, Roth IRAs, 401ks, but with some added benefits to help offset medical costs. And I think if you're like any of us, particularly here in the United States, unfortunately, right, wrong, or indifferent, medical costs do tend to be a little bit high in this country. Now, if you have an employer that is generous for your benefits with the insurance, hey, that's a great thing. But for many out there like myself that are entrepreneurs and many people that I've talked to that don't have an employer provided healthcare plan, through Obamacare, the exchanges, or whatever the case may be, many times you either have to go without health insurance, just pay everything out of pocket, or go for a possibly pretty spendy family coverage or single coverage. And a component of this that can be very beneficial is the HSA or health savings account that we're going to talk about today with today's guest. Now, if you followed the podcast from the beginning, episode 41 had David McKnight on, author of the Power of Zero books, also has the Power of Zero YouTube channel. And he has mentioned the strategy, or I should say many strategies, utilizing the health savings account to maximize benefits, compounding the growth in it, especially with self-direction, and then having it as a, shall we say, an additional tax-free income stream later in retirement, and another bucket of money in the tax-free bucket, so to speak, that Barry Brooksby and I have talked about in previous podcasts, episode 3 and episode 45. So again, this is just more of I want to say a high level overview of the HSA account, who can benefit, how it works, how it can be to your advantage, especially if you're in a high tax bracket and or have a high deductible tax plan. And as we kind of will go over in the show, the high deductible tax plan isn't like a dollar threshold per se. You may have a $10,000 deductible on your healthcare plan. Maybe that's a high deductible for you. Maybe that's quite a bit of your income, but it does not meet the IRS standards for what's considered the high deductible health plan. Again, we're just going to do a high level overview, kind of talk about the pros and cons and who can benefit and who qualifies for an HSA. If you're interested in the show notes, I will be including the IRS publications on HSAs as well as their redheaded stepchild FSAs, which we will talk about briefly. If any of you suffer from insomnia, feel free to open those, read them before going to bed. I'm quite certain it'll cure your insomnia. So again, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast channel, be it Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you use. Also, be sure to follow and subscribe to the W Freedom Nexus on the YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. With that, we'll be getting into today's podcast after a word from these sponsors.
This week's podcast is brought to you by Focus Wealth Group. Do you know you need to get life insurance, but don't know where to start or how much to get? Have you heard of infinite banking, but not sure how it works? Reach out to Barry Brooksby and his team. Barry is not only a mentor, but a friend who has helped me for the past 6 years in my pursuit of cash flow and financial independence. Their mission is simple. They teach people how to make money and hold on to more money. Learn more and set up your free initial consultation at focuswealthgroup.com.
Are you tired of the 9-to-5 lifestyle? Do you want more freedom to do what you want, when you want it, without sacrificing your current income? Then this is the show for you. Every week, we dive into John's journey towards financial freedom and everything he has learned since 2014. Real estate investing, cryptocurrency, stocks, private lending, foreign residency, tax saving strategies, infinite banking, assets protection, and much more. Now, here is your host, the founder of the Wealth and Freedom Nexus, John Rickarn.
for coming on the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you today, John?
Good. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. I know we had a couple scheduling conflicts, and of course, with me having a almost 1-year-old with daycare outings and foot and mouth and flu and COVID and everything else under the sun, I'm glad we could finally make this work. So
Yeah, all of the above.
exactly. So now, Charli, you and I have, I was just, not to age ourselves, but I was just thinking back. It's like, geez, we've known each other almost 2 decades now, back from our SMSU days, Go Mustangs here in Marshall, Minnesota. But for my listeners that, are just hearing about you for the first time and your company, can you just kind of give us a brief background on yourself, kind of your business that you started, and maybe as a final note, what exactly does SPHR stand for?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Charli Gamber, and I, as John referred to, graduated from SMSU in 2008 with a degree in business management, concentrating in HR, minoring in psychology. And then I was one of those strange people who actually went out and did HR. So at this point in time, I mean, I've been doing HR related fields for about 16 years.
Okay.
And basically what that SPHR stands for is Senior Professional in Human Resources. But what it really means is I went out and took a test and proved that I know all of these things about how to manage humans. So
gotcha.
what that boils down to. And John referenced this as well. I started my own business, Benefits with Heart. I help companies to find the correct benefits for them and help make sure that their employees understand the benefits that they're offering and are using them to the full extent of their potential.
Sure. No, it makes sense. And I know, I mean, obviously we can go down the rabbit hole of everything from, short-term disability to health insurance to every other benefit that a company may or may not want to offer their employees. But one I really wanted to kind of concentrate on today is the HSA, or health savings account. And I've actually had one in the past. I don't have one now. I've kind of explained a little bit in the intro, and we'll probably go into more detail. But maybe just at a high level, what is an HSA and how long have they been around?
A HSA stands for a health savings account. Us HR people love our acronyms.
Oh, sure.
So a health savings account is a tax-advantaged account that allows you to put money aside for your medical, dental, optical expenses, but also to save money on that for tax purposes. They've been around since December of 2003, so roughly around the time that I met John.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that.
Yep. So they've been around for a while, and they are an extremely valuable tool.
Okay.
For the portfolio.
All right. Now, as I understand, and I've had a number of guests before in the show, talking about different tax strategies and tax advantaged accounts. Taking a sidestep into the retirement world, you have your traditional retirement accounts. You get a tax deduction up front with what you put in. It grows tax free, but then you're taxed when you take money out. In a Roth account or Roth 401k, it kind of works in reverse. You don't get an upfront tax deduction. It grows tax-free, and then the dispersions are tax-free. As I understand with HSA, it's kind of a blend where if it's done properly, the money goes in tax-free or you get a tax deduction. It grows tax-free, and then when I shouldn't say distributions, but when it's paid out for expenses, then it's also tax-free or it's not taxed as well. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that is all exactly correct. And I mean, a lot of times when I'm explaining how in a 401k or a Roth 401k works, like the explanation that I give to people is the government's going to get their money at some point in time.
Sure.
If you use an HSA the way it's intended to be used, you can get away with not paying taxes, basically.
Nice. Okay. So
yeah. So to your point, you do not put money, or you do not pay taxes on the HSA when you're putting money into the account. The account does have investment potential, so you can use the account to put money into investments, and that money grows tax-free while it's in investments. And then if you're using the money on qualified medical, dental, or optical expenses, it is also tax-free at that point in time. Okay. So it is an extremely valuable tool.
Okay. Sounds good. And now we might be jumping ahead a little bit here, but since you kind of brought up, and there's always qualified and unqualified, and I mentioned medical. I'm sure obviously if I don't know, I trip over my son's toys and I sprain my ankle, I have to go into the hospital and get it reset. I'm sure obviously that would be covered. Dental, I don't know, I just had a cavity fixed last year, and then a optical, eyeglasses, eye checks, etc. Outside of that, are there any other, expenses that people may not immediately think of that is covered or wouldn't be covered? I mean, for me, I'm just thinking like, daycare expenses or long-term care later on, or I don't know, massages or chiropractic appointments, for instance.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And massages, I would have to check on.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that one off the top of the head. So there's actually a IRS publication that will tell you exactly everything that you can use
Okay.
for the HSA. But to your point, I mean, the medical, dental, and optical, those are all pretty self-explanatory.
Okay.
If it's being prescribed to you, there's a really strong possibility that you're going to be able to use it for
Okay.
those. You can actually also use it for some over-the-counter things. So some pain medications, allergy relief, heartburn medication. And another thing that's really beneficial for women is feminine hygiene products.
Ah,
It can be used for those as well to save tax money on those expenses. But if you are using your HSA and you're going to use it, if I take my HSA card down to the local liquor store and buy a thing of beer with it, then at that point in time, the government is going to tax that at the usual rate.
sure. Yeah, because you're now using it as a qualified expense there. And I don't know, maybe you could, I don't know, maybe some lawyer out there could say, well, the alcohol is a medicinal to help with depression of my client. And I don't know, we'll let the lawyers figure that out. But I think a straight answer, that's probably not gonna fly with the IRS. So
Yeah, I don't think the IRS has that good of a sense of humor.
yeah, and at the time of this recording, they just got some new funding, and they're hoping to hire 87,000 more agents. So probably not the best time to push the envelope with the IRS. So, I obviously talked about the advantages of an HSA. Money goes in tax free, grows tax free, and then the distributions, paybacks, expense payments comes out tax free as long as it's qualified. Can just anyone get an HSA, or are there like certain parameters or health plans that are associated with it, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really great question too. So there's a handful of qualifications in order to
Okay.
have an HSA. You have to be at least 18 years old.
Okay.
You have to be on what the government considers to be a high deductible health plan. So a high deductible health plan does not just mean a health plan that is a high deductible health plan. It's got a
Of course
special
not.
definition. It is a plan that is set up that meets the IRS guidelines. And for
Okay.
the most part, the difference between these plans versus just a regular plan with a high deductible is that you are responsible for paying your first medical dollars up to that deductible.
Okay.
So if you go in and you see a doctor, or if you have prescriptions, you're going to pay for all of those expenses until that deductible is met. And then at that point in time, you're going to start paying the co-insurance along
Okay.
with the insurance plan kicking in for a portion of the co-insurance as well.
Okay. Sounds good.
Can't be on Medicare, and you cannot be claimed as a dependent on anyone else's taxes as well.
Gotcha.
There are some special circumstances where people who are U.S. citizens who are not living in the U.S. can have them, but that probably goes beyond the scope of this conversation today. So just know that if you're one of those people, you probably need to do a little additional digging.
Okay. Yeah, that actually could tie in with some of my previous podcasts. I think number 35 with Bobby Casey and a couple others that I've had, kind of the expat community, so to speak. But we'll just, tackle that bull at a later time. So now, obviously, I'm guessing the IRS just has a more of a definition where, like, if you and I are in discussion, if I have a, say my healthcare plan is I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers, a $10,000 a year deductible. Well, that I might consider high. Maybe I only make 30,000 a year, whatever. If I'm, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, $10,000 is probably a rounding error. So, maybe a $10 million deductible might be considered, high for them, or maybe not. But, if you do meet the IRS qualifications, I'm just thinking back to, this is back in 2007, myself personally, before my wife and I got married. I ended up getting a very, I don't remember the numbers, but it was kind of more like a catastrophic insurance where, like you said, I go to the doctor, I pay for that full bill. I go to the dentist, I pay for that full bill, prescriptions, medications, etc. But, as the name implies, something catastrophic happens. I get hit by a car, I need back surgery, I'm in the ER for 6 months, I have 2 years of rehabilitation, etc., and I have millions of dollars of bills. That's obviously where that kind of came in once I hit the deductible. Would the, kind of generally speaking, the catastrophic plans also be a play into this, where if you have that, you could qualify for an HSA?
This week's podcast is brought to you by Spartan Invest. Spartan currently manages hundreds of turnkey properties across Alabama and Tennessee, and is where I personally bought my first out-of-state turnkey property. In fact, I have 2 properties with them now, and both tenants just renewed for another 2 years. That should tell you the quality of their team and their due diligence. If you are a first-time investor or are looking to expand your real estate portfolio, check out SpartanInvest.com.
Some of the catastrophic plans may also qualify too. Generally speaking, there's an age limit on catastrophic plans.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think. I don't think it's 26. I think it's like 28 or 30, perhaps even.
Okay.
But once you're older than that, you no longer can do just the catastrophic plans. And we all view things now through the lens of the Affordable Care Act. So
sure,
you can do a catastrophic plan if you choose to, but it may not cover for Affordable Care Act coverage for you
right,
time too. So
okay, sounds good. Now, kind of getting back to the HSAs, and let's just my listeners, they've checked with their HR department. Yep, I have a quote high deductible plan that qualifies, or I do not, but I have an option to get a plan that allows for this. As far as the HSA goes, how much money can I put in, or is there various limits to, like, if I'm single, just myself, or can you put in more if you're married or have, a kid, or if you're the Duger family, have 19 kids, or anything in between?
Yep, they actually only break it down into 2 different categories. It's single, which is $3,650.
Okay.
For what you're able to contribute in 2022.
Okay.
Family is $7,300 for 2022. And just like your 401k, if you're over 55, you're able to make those makeup contributions. You can do an additional $1,000 into it.
Okay.
If you're 55.
All right. So it's just like the IRAs. I don't know what is with this whole, you're over 55, we throw in $1,000 extra, and somehow that will, I don't know, make everything turn out correctly. I don't know. So, all right. So,
logic.
Yeah, exactly. So, $7,300, if you're married, I'm just kind of thinking outside the box. So if you do max it out, $7,300 a year. I know some companies, they'll help chip in for part of that contribution. Some just say, well, we offer it, but you have to put in the full amount. Now, let's just use round numbers. 7,300 a year, you contribute for 10 years, that's 73,000. Now, as I understand with an HSA, another kind of benefit is, let's just say 1 year, you barely have a cold, you just have your maybe monthly prescription, you never go into the ER, the urgent care, nothing, and you just don't have a lot of medical expenses. With an HSA, you can, bank that and kind of let it keep growing and compounding year after year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a really good point too. A health savings account is yours. The money in it is yours to keep. So if your employer contributes to it at the end of the year, if you haven't used that money is yours to keep.
Okay.
If you put money into it at the end of the year, it's not like a flex spending account where those are use it or lose it. It rolls over and the money in it just stays in there until you've used it, or it goes out of the account for whatever reason you choose to.
Gotcha. Okay. And now, in kind of going down the rabbit hole of, so I would say tax strategies, anyone that's followed me on social media knows I'm kind of a tax and money nerd. But one of my, shall we say, mentors or someone that I look up to, David McKnight, who is also my podcast on episode 41, he's really kind of stressed, shall we say, kind of like banking HSAs and then taking the contributions out later, especially if you don't need it. So I'm just kind of using round numbers again. Let's just say, you, Charlie, you have $3,000 out of pocket medical expenses, but your business took off that year. You don't need that $3,000 right now, and maybe that HSA is invested in a really good investment account. Could you potentially, say you have $3,000, you keep the receipts, you have them scanned in and documented. Here it is, the tail end of 2022. But let's just say fast forward 5 years, you want your HSA to compound a little bit more. Could you document your expenses, again, that $3,000 for 2022? And I don't know, let's say 2027 or maybe later, then reimburse yourself that $3,000 at a later time. Is that permitted by the IRS?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that.
Okay.
So what you're able to do is you're able to, like, you can use your credit card to pay for that that expense.
Okay.
And then you just keep those receipts and you reimburse yourself out of the health savings account when you're ready to do it. And to your friend's point too, one of the things that's really recommended to do is to wait until you are at a season of your life where your tax situation is going to be more favorable to make
Sure.
those distributions. And to your point as well, I mean, to be able to keep receiving the growth from the account and
Okay.
hold off on that. So if you're in a position to do that, yeah, absolutely, you are able to reimburse later on.
Okay. So, and is there a time limit at all like of that, or as long as I have it documented, as long as I'm 6 feet above and not 6 feet under, I can take out the distributions or reimburse myself, I should say?
I'm not aware of anything where you aren't able to do that once the person who owns the health savings account passes away. But I mean, obviously doing it before you do that is probably the
Sure.
ideal.
Yeah, makes sense. So, okay. And then just kind of a sidebar for any of my listeners, we won't really kind of go down this rabbit hole, but with HSAs, some people are probably familiar with, keeping in a standard bank account, maybe getting 1 or 2% interest. But you actually can, like Charlie said, actually invest those funds later on, typical run of the mill, your stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. However, if you reach out to any of my contacts, my website, like Specialized Trust and Quest, you can self-direct your HSAs just like you self-direct your retirement accounts. So then, instead of just that plain vanilla basket of investments, adventurous like me, I want to invest in agriculture in a foreign country or promissory notes or anything like that. Again, you can kind of, say you put in that 7,300, compound that growth, 10, 12% a year, reimburse the expenses later, but then have a nice little, pot of money, if you will, as you get into retirement. As I think just about anyone, most of us are going to have more medical expenses as we get older versus as we're younger. Kind of talk about HSAs, and I know the IRS treats different accounts. I know there was the Secure and Secure 2.0 Act where, different rules were set up for inheriting of retirement accounts. If let's just say a couple file, married filing jointly, and, Mr. Smith has an HSA and they pass away, whether single or married, what happens to an HSA account when someone passes away? Can anyone inherit it? Can it go to, I, John Rick Garn, want my son to inherit my HSA funds, or, how does that work?
Yeah, you are able to establish beneficiaries for your health savings account.
Okay.
And the way that they have this set up, if your health savings account is going to your spouse, then your spouse is able to use it just like a regular HSA and receive all the benefits of it. If it goes to anyone who's not your spouse, then it has to be distributed at that point in time, and they are going to have to show it as income on their tax.
So then a tax favored account would be a non-tax favored account depending on who inherits that. I know they had some legislation with inherited accounts where if someone passes away And if your spouse inherits the IRA, then okay, they could just take the minimum distributions and keep it running almost forever. If it was a non-spouse that inherited it, they had 10 years to take out the distributions, and then they may or may not be taxed on it depending on their situation. So figures the IRS is probably going to keep the same thing along the lines for the HSAs there. So going in, like you said, we're recording this here at the end of 2022, Charli, and any changes to HSAs or any upcoming legislation as we go into 2023 and beyond for anyone that's maybe looking at opening this account?
Yeah, the IRS has increased the amount that you can put into it for 2023.
Okay.
It's $3,850 for an individual for 2023, $7,750 if it's more than just you on your health savings account.
Okay.
And that is a pretty substantial increase too.
Okay.
Where the IRS is concerned as far as these things go. But outside of that, there's nothing else on the horizon that I really saw or am aware of that is coming to change as far as HSAs go. Just a little more money you can put into it next year.
Okay. Makes sense. So as I know we're kind of winding down, I want to be respectful of your time, Charli, but there's the shall we say, the redheaded stepchild of the HSA called the FSA. I believe that stands for flex spending accounts. I'm personally not a fan of them, but I know many employers that offer them. And I think the biggest, shall we say, difference of the flex spending, obviously you can use that, your many over-the-counter medications and reimburse yourself just like an HSA. But the HSA, you can put in money. If you don't use it all up, it just continues to grow and compound year after year. The FSA, if it comes to, end of December and you have $500 left in there, if you don't use it, then you're kind of out that money, which probably brings up two questions to me. One, why is that? And then two, where does that money actually go since it doesn't go to the beneficiary?
I would say probably the reason why flex spending accounts are use it or lose it is because the IRS does not give out a whole lot of opportunities to not pay your tax money on things. Outside of that, I mean, I'm not sure why there are so many differences between a flex spending account and a health savings account. Really, the two achieve many of the same purposes. When I was talking to an employee and they were doing an enrollment and they were looking at a flex spending account, I would always tell them, I wear contacts. I'm going to wear contacts again next year. I am 100% confident that I will spend $200 on contacts this next year. It makes sense for me to put $200 into a flex spending account so that I can use that to pay towards my contacts.
Okay.
Now, don't guess and think, I might have this surgery done. I might need $1,000 in it. Only put into your flex spending account exactly what you are truly intending to use for the year. Okay. But to your other question about what happens to that money, so the IRS has said that your employer has to use that money for administrative purposes for that account. Now, when you set up a flex spending account, that risk goes both ways. So you can put $1,000 into your flex spending account. You can spend that all on January 2nd, and then you can leave the company, and the company is just out that money. Okay. So this allows the company to recoup some of that and to pay down some of their administrative costs for offering these flex spending accounts.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and that was going to be the one thing that I mentioned to you too is, I mean, if you're looking to game flex spending, if you know for sure that you're leaving your employer, if you put all the money into flex spending that you can use and use it for whatever it is that you have, medical, dental, or optical going on, that is one way to get the full benefit of a flex spending account. Your employer is not going to appreciate that you do that, but
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're leaving and you still have, several $100s in your account, you can, I don't know, pre-order, 3 years worth of contacts through 1-800-CONTACTS and hope your prescription doesn't change, or I don't know, years worth of Tylenol or whatever.
Yeah. As long as the expense was incurred during the time that you're employed, you're able to reimburse for that.
Okay. So that's to be incurred by the time you're employed, not after you leave the job.
Exactly. Yeah. Very few employers allow you to use your flex spending dollars after that. Okay. But there are a couple of options. Employers can actually allow their employees to use those funds for 2.5 months after the end of their plan year. They can also allow employees to carry over, I think it's $550. It's either $500 or $550 from their plans too. So if you're interested in doing those things to make it a little more likely that your employers can use it, you can design your benefits.
Okay. All right. Well, this has all been really interesting. I actually got a page of notes myself to recap and maybe look into a little bit more as well. Now, if anyone listening to this, maybe, they're a business owner or maybe an entrepreneur or whatever the case may be, if they're maybe, interested in learning more, or I know you're headquartered and licensed in South Dakota, if they're maybe in South Dakota and interested in learning more, what's the best way to reach out to you and maybe see if there'll be an opportunity to set this up for their employees?
Yeah, they can reach out to me at Charli, CHARLI, at benefitswithheart.com, or they can reach me on my cell phone. It's 605-951-0625.
All right. Well, good. And again, for those listening, these will be in the show notes. And like I said, Charli's kind of shall we say, a local market in South Dakota. I mean, I've had listeners in over 100 countries, so I highly doubt whoever my listener is in Nigeria that's subscribed to my podcast, I highly doubt you can help that individual. But with that said, I'm sure there's many that you can, as United States and the Midwest has been my most heavy listenership, so to speak.
Fair enough.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I appreciate your time coming on the podcast, Charli, and hope all goes well for the rest of 2022 and into 2023 for your business.
Yeah. It's always good seeing you, John.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to share, rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. For more updates, check out www.wealthandfreedomnexus.com. Remember, nothing on this show should be considered tax, legal, investment, or professional advice. This show is produced solely for educational and informational purposes. Please consult an appropriate and licensed tax, legal, real estate, or business professional for specific advice for your situation. For distribution or publication rights or media interviews, please contact the host.